the automotive world, just like life, it is easy to get well distracted, get tunnel vision, and only focus on one element. That for me is big SUVs, but sometimes something comes along that reminds me that, well, scaling things down isn't always a bad look or a bad offering. Hey, welcome to the Station Road Warrior. I'm your host, Grant Roberson. Now behind me is the 2023 Infiniti QX50 Sport, delivering that all-wheel drive and also delivering quite a bit of pep in your step, comfort on the inside, and really not too bad of a scale for this 6'2" goofy frame. There's nothing about smaller SUVs or smaller vehicles that truly gives me pause, but naturally as the roofline lowers, my back pain increases. Also, what I'm seeing across smaller SUVs is just the quirkiness on the exterior. They're all chiseling up, trying to almost look like one another, because if one does it right, why should we be that different? However, here on the QX50, I'd argue they are doing it different. Nice regal approach on the outside, sweeping lines, most notably here at the hood, sculpted to almost perfection. No hard edges, just a voluptuous front end, really diving down and having just a nice wavy effect. Sweeping down the sides, nice taut lines, a little bit of chisel here in the midline to be expected, but diving right back in, and just again, a little bit of wave flaring out there at the bottom. The whole purpose of pointing out this sculpting is because, well, they do it well. When we look at the others, just not my cup of tea. So when it comes to classifying this vehicle, it's referred to as a compact SUV, though I'd argue that word compact must have an asterisk beside it because this vehicle measured up into the upper sizing of that segment, falling just shy of my threshold when it comes to mid-size vehicles. Now, overall numbers, this vehicle is about 184.7 inches. Wheelbase, not too bad at 110 inches. Width, just shy of 75 inches wide and 66 inches tall. Now, the overall height gains it from one key component, and that is ground clearance, pushing around about 8.6 inches, which means this vehicle can certainly handle the off the beaten path, though I'd argue this luxury liner doesn't want any scrapes and dings, so I'd keep it to the pavement, but it'll handle those snowy days when they arrive. With our recent test drive behind the wheel of the QX60, we definitely know and understand how Infiniti can make the exterior premium-esque with blinging things out right down to the grille warfare. But here on the Sport model, you could say it's a more smoky atmosphere with the black appointment, specifically around the window dressing, the roof rails, most notably though at the four corners and the grille warfare. Now starting here at the corners first, 255 45s wrapping a 20-inch wheel, darkened as you see it. At the grille though, this is where it really glosses things up and grabs people's attention, most notably right here through the middle, really glossed up black. Also, all the various appointments like the Infiniti badging and such are also darkened up, as you see front and center in the middle. As you sweep around the rest of the front end, body color all the way around, nice, a little bit of chiseling here and there, but not overdone. Also tons of airflow naturally right through the middle, down below, and even operational here on the outer side. This exterior color is referred to as graphite shadow. It has a nice minimal contrast between the darkened accents and this body color, giving this smoky, romantic kind of look. However, if you do want to step up the contrast, certainly go with a lighter color, and that will give more of a dramatic presentation. Now, before we get to the back end, let's talk about smart key systems, and certainly Infiniti does it well. No traditional key, just a nice fob you keep in your pocket. Walk up to the vehicle, it knows you're here, and just slide in your hand, and it welcomes you with the folding out of the mirrors. As you walk away, if you want to lock it up, just press any corresponding button at all four doors, and again, the vehicle is locked. Now at the back end, again, what I like is the softness and curves. This sweeping around of the rear taillight mimics the headlights at the front with kind of the dramatic approach. Operational turn signal that goes all the way across. Pretty decent bank of glass and a nice overhang here that sweeps down and gives you a nice cutaway here on the profile. As you go down, a little bit of curvaceous in this and bellowing out there at the bottom. Rubber fascia that sweeps all the way around, as well as nice dual pipes I mentioned earlier that are darkened up to go with the overall accents. Also going with that is the Infiniti insignias. Before we look at the abundant space that awaits, let's talk about the ease of access with this rear power hatch, activating it either with the key fob or simply press the button here. But one thing I always like to check to see is if it has a hands-free approach, and thankfully the QX50 does. All you have to do is simply come right about here, swing your leg, and it rises to the occasion. Now, once it gets up out of the way, what you're going to see is a whopping 31 cubic feet here behind the second row. And this is really where a compact SUV really outshines a sedan, because sedans right now are going 12, 14, at the most maybe 15 cubic feet. This easily doubling that. Now, as you lay the second row, that's going to double the space to around about 64 cubic feet. One other thing to talk about is the lift height of this rear hatch. And I'm 6'2", and I barely just get a little bit of contact right here. Not a big deal. What I like is that it goes actually cathedral once you get underneath it. So simply getting about right here, you'll notice I have plenty of headspace and not really a huge headbanging affair. Lastly, what I want to talk about is, again, tons of space, but I always like to see what awaits underneath. And what you're going to see is a nice deep cargo area. Going to hold some items. In our case, what we did is put grocery items here so they wouldn't sling around, making it more convenient and less things to pick up when we got home. To lay the second row flat on this 60-40 split, you do have corresponding handles on either side. Just simply pull and the second row will lay flat. In some cases, when you lay the second row flat, you'll notice that the headrest comes in contact with the seat back of the front occupants. This could be the case if you have someone as tall as me, placing that seat in its furthest position. Not a big deal, because all you have to do is kind of reach up here, press the seat back change, and that will allow this to lower down with ease. Then you can naturally slide that back just a hair to give you that comfort once again. Now, when it comes to sport under the hood on this sport model, well, thankfully that's standard across all QX50s, referring to the turbocharged engine. That's going to be a 2.0 liter inline 4-cylinder, delivers 268 horses and 280 foot-pounds of torque. As for the grip at the four corners, well, it either comes in the all-wheel drive as tested here or front-wheel drive versions, all coupled to a CVT transmission. Now, I mentioned earlier about how these lay flat and it creates one seamless cargo floor from back to front. One thing to note, it does angle up just a hair, which makes it a little bit more compromising sliding big items in here. Either way, you're only going to want to stack this too high, because you're going to create a kind of blind spot with this filled with cargo space. Now, when you go to put it back up, one thing to note, you do want to hold the handle down here on the hip area on either side. Just hold it. That's going to allow you to get it into position, and it's not going to lock into a place until you want to release it. Once you do, release it, and it gives you great overall angle. As you can tell, nice reclinability. If you prefer more of an upright, just simply pull the handle and slide it forward just a hair. More of the case in this vehicle is going to be that you haul people, not cargo. So let's talk about overall legroom numbers and comfort. Now, first off, you're going to have 2+3 design with barely a little hump here in the middle, which means you're going to have decent legroom and feet placement for your backseat occupants if you do need to go 3 wide. As for legroom numbers, it's about equal from front to back, just shy of 40 inches in the front and just shy of 39 inches here in the back. Now, what does that mean for, well, 6'2"? Well, that means it's pretty decent space in the front should equal pretty decent space back here. Where it begins is simply climbing in. Not necessarily a head banging affair up here, but I do kind of squish down just a little bit. But once you're in here, it's a cathedral-like feel, really cavernous and plenty of space. As for legroom, what you're going to notice is these kind of niches here that really makes it a non-knee bleeding affair. I do notice that on my side, the driver's side where I typically am, the seat placement must be fairly low, because I can't really tuck my feet under the seat, which could be a little claustrophobic feeling. So maybe if those seats are risen just a little bit, that will help you slide under. That's something you're going to see on a true big SUV. It's just the ability to slide those feet under the front seats. Lastly, down below is airflow. You're going to have nice venting back here. There's going to be no tri-zone system in a compact to be expected, but the placement of these vents here really allows you to have good airflow versus some options that only have the vents up front. Lastly is connectivity in the form of both USB-A and USB-Cs. When you climb inside the QX50, you may notice the steering wheel, some controls, the gauge cluster, but well, honestly, no, you're going to miss that and go straight to the dual stack screens. First off, the 8-inch screen up top, 7-inch down below. Now, in normal operation, this is the default GPS option, have your mapping system. I like the fact they keep it separate because it just doesn't clutter looking at one screen and kind of minimize everything else going on. In this case, you'll keep the map separate. Now, oftentimes we're really getting past this. We're using our phones, we're using the connectivity, but this built-in GPS is a great backup. If you're in a poor cellular service, you're going to want the vehicle to have GPS like this one. Now, what I like is, of course, Bluetoothing, getting my music to the vehicle. But the better option really is the Apple CarPlay. Now, it took me a few moments to really understand because Apple CarPlay wasn't interacting. Instead, you'll see that, let me go to this connection. So I'm in the functionality here, which is the menu. Let me go back to audio. This is, obviously you can tell on Bluetooth. You see down below the Bluetooth option is selected. And then if I go to the menu, what you're going to see is just this here, but then click on connections. Once you get to connections, this is where it's going to show, maybe you have multiple phones, in this case just mine, and you'll see these 4 little icons. You'll see the music one, that means that your phone is capable of Bluetooth and music. You'll notice that the actual phone icon is not selected, so I'm going to select that. Then it's going to say up above, it's going to say your phone is now hands-free to the vehicle, and so on. Now you can click on info, that's going to tell you how many contacts you have downloaded or whatever. But the problem was I just did not have the Apple CarPlay working, that nice bubbly looking interface that resembles my phone. So then I went back to this area and I noticed a little play button here. So I selected that, and what that is the actual engaging of the Apple CarPlay, and then boom, it's up top. This is such a better interaction because now you're using the Apple CarPlay up top on the screen, 8-inch, making life easy. And then you have various other functionality down below. Most importantly, what I like is the climate controls. You do have the climate controls on the outer side, but this is just a little bit more intuitive. And more importantly, on cold days, this is where you find the steering wheel option, heat option, the button where I typically would find it up here, some steering wheel, heat my steering wheel, just didn't find it. It was only when I went to the climate controls. Now in this functionality, I'm able to use my Apple CarPlay like I traditionally do, click on my music here, and then I can easily interact with it versus kind of more of an antiquated look through the Bluetooth option. So Infiniti has stepped it up when it comes to infotainment as well as connectivity, and what I like is just sliding my phone right here, and it has the wireless charging, which you'll see when it's connected correctly is illuminated back there. You do have the connections to the traditional USB-C and USB-A and a traditional power outlet. Just in front of that is going to be dual cup holders, nice springy material there to keep smaller drinks in place. Coming back a little bit further, you will see the transmission selector, just simply up, down, and press the park button to disengage the transmission. Between the front and occupants, you'll find this dial-specific knob right here. And the one thing with the default GPS, this is just simply going to interact with the map. Also has a button here to show your surround view cameras. I'll show you in just a second. But when you do have the Apple CarPlay up above, I like the fact that that actually scrolls back and forth versus you kind of stretching up and pressing with this. Not a big deal, it's not an arm stretch away, but you can just simply use the dial knob. You do have kind of a back button. Once you press that, that'll get you back to maybe the main menu. Again, this Apple CarPlay is so priceless with the interaction. You press the return button again, that's going to get you back to your home screen and allow you to kind of go through the various apps with ease. Now, one thing to be mindful of, which I don't really care for, is let's say, oh, I want to go back to that map. So I'm going to press the map button, and then it defaults to the GPS. Well, the only thing I don't like about that is I could not figure out how to get back to the Apple CarPlay screen with those controls. So then I had to come down here and go back to the device connections, basically engage the Apple CarPlay again. It comes up here, then I press it there, that got me back to it. So once you have the Apple CarPlay up, I pretty much think, well, leave the navigation alone built into the vehicle unless you really need it. And of course, if you've got good cellular signal, you've got GPS going on right there when you need it. Now I mentioned the camera button here. If you press that, it will give you a nice surround view of what's going on. You've got the forward button, in this case, going forward, what's ahead of you, the surround view. This really works out well in those tight spots, specifically when it comes to curb damage on your wheels, because, well, this is just going to give you the outer edges looking from above. And if you put it in reverse, you're naturally going to get the backup view, and you do have sensors to tie in with all this as well to give you that audible effect. Now, if you get out of that and press camera again, press it again, you can go through all the various selections, put it in park, and you're back to Apple CarPlay. Just a quick glance over at the controls on either side. I did mention how you have climate that can be displayed here, but you have it as well on either side, dual zones, temperature select up and down here, fan speed as well as various mode selects, vent selects, heated and cooled seat when needed, and your various functionality when it comes to traditional radio controls. If you want to sport things up, you do have various driving modes which translate there on the gauge cluster. I typically keep it in standard mode, but you do have sport. You have a personal setup as well as the standard mode and eco mode. When it comes to the gauge cluster, it's going to be somewhat traditional with an analog, tach, and speedometer, a little bit of a digital readout in the middle, and that's all controlled here with these controls, basically going left or right to find the various functionalities and settings, as well as giving you a readout in the middle of your Apple CarPlay or whatever music you listen to. The one thing I just could not find is a digital readout for speed. I went through as many of these functionalities as I could, and the one thing you'll notice is that you do have selector arrows to the left and right, but it doesn't appear that you can go up and down where there's other functions that are hidden and you scroll up and down. Just couldn't find it. That means that you are somewhat stuck with the analog speed. I'd prefer a digital readout. Now, it does have the speed limit sign up above, so it is giving you a visual of what the speed is around you, but again, I just could not find the digital speed going through all these options. On the steering wheel, you're going to have entertainment controls here on the left. On the right, you're going to have, again, the display for the LCD for the gauge cluster, as well as setting your cruise control. This does have kind of that autonomous-like feel, and again, this surround sensors. Once you activate that and set your cruise, and you can set the spacing between you and other vehicles, you do have the steering control option over here on the side. That basically allows this vehicle to give you slight interactions, keeping you in the lanes. You do have to keep your hands engaged, and it will warn you right there if you don't. So when it comes down to finally describing this vehicle, put it in a box and just labeling it, well, the term compact, I think, doesn't really fit the build. It feels so much larger than maybe it appears on paper. Where it starts is on the inside, handling this 6'2" frame with ease. The ground clearance that gives you a commanding view. Now, where the word compact maybe comes in is obviously the exterior sizing and, well, fitting this vehicle easily into the urban jungle, parallel parking, going downtown, and making life so much simpler than, say, my oversized SUV I own. So certainly before you judge the size and scale of this vehicle, climb inside. Now, as always, thank you for watching this edition of Road Warrior. Keep both hands on the wheel and eyes straight ahead.